I'm Keri Blakinger, the author of Corrections in Ink. The bulk of what my book is about is that I went to prison. I grew up as a competitive figure skater, and when my skating career fell apart, I fell apart, and I ended up, struggling with drug addiction for almost a decade. I did heroin, I did sex work, I was living on the streets at points, but then I was also sometimes doing a little better and struggling my way through college while I was dealing with an addiction. And in the end, I got arrested in 2010 and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. And I ended up serving a little under 2 years of that before I got out and was, lucky and privileged enough to be able to rebuild and get a second chance and become a reporter who now covers prisons and criminal justice. I think getting through the experience of drug addiction is kind of dumb luck in some ways because there's so many incredibly dangerous things that you do in the course of an addiction that by all means I should have done. I think it's a lot of dumb luck when some people get through it and others don't. In terms of prison, I mean, I got through it in small ways, biting off little chunks of time, doing crosswords obsessively, running laps back and forth across the cell, reading more than I will probably ever have a chance to read again in my life. Doing time in prison, you set such a bare minimum goal for yourself in some ways. Like you might have other goals when you're doing time, but at the end of the day, the thing that matters the most is that simply time has to pass. Like that's sort of the metric of success in prison per se. Like everyone's common goal is simply for time to pass. So you can do your time and get out and go home. I learned so much about how broken our criminal justice system is. And I think that is, clearly not the most personal or optimistic takeaway, but I think it's the takeaway that has probably influenced the course of my life since then the most. I did not get out and set out to become a criminal justice reporter. I just wanted to be a reporter. And I ended up falling into covering criminal justice, but I think that part of the reason I turned out to be so good at that is because I understood the system. And it became apparent to me how important it was to help reveal this, the ins and outs of this incredibly opaque system. I have such a hard time with, when people want to ask what I've learned about addiction, because I think that so often people ask that question with the hope that I can give some sort of silver bullet answer. I got to a point where I was sick of the life that I was living, and that was a huge part of it. And I was, for the first time sober, seeing people who I cared about who were still high and looking at it from the other side. And, for me, that had a big impact in the longer run, when I got out, finding something else that I could be passionate and obsessive about. These are things that were huge for me. Those aren't necessarily the answers for everyone. One of the things that I learned while doing time was how to become the kind of person for whom time would pass quickly. And I know that sounds like a weird answer in some ways, but what I mean is prison is miserable. I'm not denying that, but if you are miserable, time passes more slowly. If you can become the kind of person who is able to find hope and joy, time can pass more quickly. I really hate to undermine or downplay how bad prison is and sort of how much underlying mental health issues can really make it so difficult to just hang on to sanity. But just sort of within the framework of whatever your mental state is, I do think that it's possible, even within that, to come to a place where time passes more quickly. If you get arrested and you're in jail and you're going to be transferred to prison, remember to write all your friends' addresses on the inner margin of the Bible. When I was in jail and they transferred us to prison, prison, the only book you could bring was a religious book. You couldn't bring an address book or anything else. And we used to, try to keep in touch with people by maintaining our address books on the inner margins of whatever religious text we were going to bring along. So not personal development advice, but just little prison tip.